Foreign hunting season at least once a year. I try to travel up to Maine and rent an Airbnb to go hunting. I never bought my own place because I can't really afford it just for a single trip every year. So doing a weekend rental makes more sense for me. Plus, I'm not exactly an expert. I'm still trying to get more experience some years. I'd go with my uncle, but in recent years he hasn't been in the best shape. Health-wise, he's not really up to it anymore. So I've been going alone more recently last year, which was 2022 at the time. I'm writing. This was the last season that I went hunting. It was November. The Airbnb I rented was near a national park. I arrived late on a Friday because I had to come home from work, get ready, then head out on the road trip. When I pulled up into the long stretch of private dirt road to get to the cabin, type Airbnb, it was pitch black outside, and it was dead silent too. This time of year, there's obviously no bugs or crickets left, so the nights are dead silent and dark up there, especially if the place you're staying is secluded. Like this one, I pulled up as close as I could to the cabin, and the owner told me the key would be hidden under the mat. Sure enough, it was there. I brought my 2 bags inside the cabin and unpacked my things onto the bed. In the one bedroom, it was a very cozy cabin, and the owner already had the heat turned up for me, which was nice. Maine gets pretty cold up there in November. There was cable and Wi-Fi in this Airbnb, so I set an alarm to get an early start at dawn, which in my opinion is the best time to find deer, or even moose. If you're lucky, the next morning I was up as soon as my alarm went off, and I was out in the woods in less than half an hour. Since this was foreign territory, to me, I posted up behind a blowdown. I found some knocked over trees. Usually this would now be a waiting game, but I heard a man's voice call from behind me. I had a mini heart attack and turned around to see some men with gray hair, but who looked like he was only 50. He was approaching me slowly. He said slowly, in a very angry-sounding voice. "What the hell are you doing here?" I responded. "Excuse me," he said, "hunting is restricted." Here, I actually was unaware of this when I explained this to him. He said, "I watched you right up here. You best leave the way. You came, this scared me." I said, "What do you mean?" "You watched me right up here," he told me. He always sees people riding up to that cabin. Always out of town, folk who come up here for the wrong reasons. I apologized to him and told him I'd leave. I grabbed my things and started walking back the way I came, and when I looked behind me, the man was gone out of sight. I walked back to the cabin, then took my car and drove to a different park that, according to some website, allowed hunting. I posted up there and had a failure of the first half of the day around midday. I went back to the cabin to just regroup and have a meal, but when I got back to the cabin, I found that the door was unlocked. I could have sworn I locked it before. When I got inside, I was almost positive certain things had been moved around and the zipper to my bag was unzipped. I couldn't remember if I left it zipped up or not, but it was typical for me to always keep my bag zipped up. I just checked every room quick before settling down. I was way too hungry to just prepare a light meal, so I drove to the little village nearby and picked up some Chinese takeout. Then I drove right back to the cabin. I was planning on heading back out to the park. At dusk, when I got back to the cabin, I just ate my food and went straight to take a nap. After my nap, I headed back out to the park. I spent about an hour walking, maybe a quarter mile, very slowly, and I wasn't finding anything. My uncle always told me you could find a deer, a moose, in 10 minutes or 10 days. It just depends on how many are present and being in the right place at the right time. Sadly, luck was not on my side this day, and so when it was starting to get dark, I packed up and started heading back to my truck. It was just a short drive back to the cabin. I cooked the pasta and meatballs I brought with me for dinner, as I had the TV on in the background. Then I laid down on the little love seat couch as I ate and watched some old black and white movie while sitting there. I thought back to earlier, how the door was unlocked and things appeared to have been moved. Only, I didn't notice anything missing. I wondered if it was just in my head or not. Long after this, I brushed my teeth and shifted to the bedroom, where I began to watch another movie in there, planning on falling asleep to it. I was starting to drift into that half-sleep state where what was going on in the movie was actually starting to blend into this half-awake dream I was kind of having, so I heard the distinct sound of a door clicking open that snapped me out of my half-sleep. I groggily looked up and noticed the closet door in the room was now cracked open. This immediately woke me up completely. Now the door being unlocked and belongings potentially being moved did not seem like a coincidence. I waited a moment and got out of bed, went to my hunting pack and grabbed my CZ-75. I went back to the bedroom, turned on the light and pointed my gun at the closet door. I yelled, "Come out now or I'll shoot a big part of me." Still didn't believe there could actually be a person in there, and I thought that I was just being overly cautious. But when the door actually pushed open, I was in pure shock. That older man from earlier in the day stepped out, and his unhappy-looking face switched to a gross smile missing a front tooth. He said, "You got me." I said, "Don't move." As I went to grab my cell phone and call 911, thank God I had service here. The sheriff's department was on their way, and I let them know I was armed and had the intruder at gunpoint. It was an excruciatingly long wait before the sheriff's deputies arrived. During that time, the man was telling me how he's sick of people like me having no respect for the parks up here. I had no idea what he meant, but I wasn't entertaining him. I kept telling him to shut up. When deputies got there, it was an obvious arrest for breaking and entering and possibly robbery, though I don't think he ever actually stole anything from me. The man claimed the door was simply unlocked, though I don't know if that was true or if he had somehow picked a lock or even climbed through a window. The Airbnb host said that there were no other hidden keys and that I definitely left the door unlocked. He seemed more concerned about whether anything of his was stolen and putting blame on me, as opposed to asking me if I was okay and apologizing for the experience. He said he had no idea who the man could have been even after getting his name. I still don't think I left the door unlocked, but thank God I was on a hunting trip and had my firearms with me to quickly neutralize the threat. I was 14 when the story took place. It was my first year hunting deer with my family, to be specific. My father, my cousin, and myself, to paint a picture. My blind was 2 miles south of my father's, with his stand being 9 miles southwest. To my camp, we drove a four-wheeler about 100 yards away from his stand, which left me with a while to walk before I even got to mine. I live in northern Michigan, and during the winter, it gets dark quickly. And early, it was around 4 p.m. when I started to get cold and decided to close up my tent. I was hunting with a 243 rifle that had a pink camo cover on it with a strap around so I could hang it off my back, closed up my blind zippers, and put my garbage away in a bucket I had. As I was throwing away my trash, I heard a couple leaves crumble, so I immediately turned my head up to see if it was a deer. After about a minute, I brushed it off as a squirrel or a bird. Disappointed, I closed my blind and headed to my father's. As I was taking my first steps out of my blind, I could see a fresh pathway brush through the leaves. It was a wide path, not from a small animal or even a deer. I immediately started thinking a bear or wolf, so I started speed walking to where my dad was. I started to panic as it started to get even darker, and I was still roughly a mile away. I was just walking, as I was stopped in my tracks by one of the most haunting and horrifying noises I'd ever heard. The best way to describe it was a bear slash man that was being murdered sounded roughly 150 yards back as I started to run with boots. And thick hunting gear was hard, with 20 pounds on my back, but fear pushed me through and I didn't stop around. 25 seconds later, I was still running when I heard it again. This time, it was louder and closer. At this point, it was completely dark out, with the moon being the only source of light. I turned around with my headlight, and what I saw is still the most terrifying thing I've ever seen. Around 50 yards away, I saw a black figure in the dark, illuminated by the moonlight behind it. It was around 10 feet tall and skinny, Without thinking twice, I started running while trying to get my gun off my back. I didn't know where I was running, but I just ran. I ended up on a road that I recognized as Rabbit Road, the road that connects my camp with the entrance to the hunting area. I ran on the road until I got to my camp. By the time I got into sight of my cabin, I turned around again and saw it again, this time further away. It was still standing up, and I can only describe it as a tall, black, skinny figure. It had long arms and long legs. As I got on my cabin steps, I threw up from exhaustion and continued to vomit for about a minute, as I later then passed out. I woke up to the sound of my dad's four-wheeler turning into the cabin driveway. I started crying as I ran up to him, hugging him. I quickly told him the story of what happened and how I ran back without stopping. He didn't believe me at first, but as we got settled inside, his face started to change as he saw the desperation in my eyes. I didn't sleep that night, or for weeks after. People have told me it was most likely a bear, or I was just seeing things. But I know what I saw. I'm older now, and I only hunt with someone with me. I also hunt with a bigger gun because it gives me reassurance that I could shoot something larger. As I'm writing this, this was the most scary experience of my life. Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed our story today. If you liked the video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel to stay updated with our latest videos. Thank you for your continuous support. We appreciate all your comments and encouragement. If you have any suggestions or stories you would like to hear, please leave them in the comments. See you in the next video.